All right. Hello and welcome to the Thematic Programming for Multicultural Celebrations webinar. My name is Beth Yates. I'm the Children's Consultant from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be your host and moderator today. And our presenter today is Justine Carlotta, Children's Department Manager at the Westchester Public Library here in Indiana. A few announcements. First of all, to register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library, and then it's under Services for Libraries. This session is set to be 1 hour, so you're eligible to receive 1 LEU for this presentation. If you're watching a recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube, or you can also find those instructions on ISL's continuing education site under LEU policies. But in short, when you watch a recording, someone in administration at your library should create a certificate for you, as they're the ones who can verify that you watched. Okay, I think that's all I have. I think we're ready to get started. Again, our presenters today is Justine Carlotta of the Westchester Public Library. Take it away, Justine.
All right, next slide. Thank you, Beth.
Sure.
So welcome everybody. Happy National Library Week. Today we're going to learn how to program with intent. So some background. Here at Westchester Public Library, we propose and plan our programs quarterly, so 3 months at a time. We just had our summer programming proposals approved, and I'm working on the fall right now. I oversee programs for ages 2 and up. Our other library branch does the baby programming. I do ages 2 and 3, 4 and 6, and then elementary. As a librarian of color, I found myself still struggling with integrating authenticity in my cultural celebration programming. Here at Westchester Public Library, we have a system-wide observances and celebrations calendar. For example, this month we're observing Arab American History Month and National Poetry Month. Next month we'll be doing mental health and Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. So in my programming, I wanted to steer away from cultural appropriation and sought after genuine celebrations of achievements and culture, identity, and empathy, and resilience, and inclusivity. I know that these are all kind of hot words right now in the news, but we at public libraries are more on a granular level than federal and state. And so here at Westchester Public Library, we're still going forward and integrating these observances and celebrations into our programming and book displays. Over the past 4 years, while observing these celebrations in my programming, I came up with a programming formula that I'm going to be sharing with you today. It's simply theme plus feature equals play, but I'm going to break it down and share a bunch of examples. So next slide. So first, I want to go into some quantitative and qualitative data on meeting the kids where they are. So why play? Here we have the nation's report card from right after COVID started. And as you can see, the kids were struggling really bad in 2022, back when we were doing our Zoom story times due to the pandemic. And what I find really interesting about youth services librarianship nowadays is that it spans across 3 distinctly different generations. So our teens, our Gen Zs, our Generation Z, they're now teens and they're struggling really hard with mental health. Generation Alpha, the kids that didn't have access to preschools during the pandemic, are entering their tweenhood. these days, and then we're just now getting to know and meet Generation Beta. They started being born this January, and so we're going to get to know a whole new generation. With thematic programming and multicultural programming, I see it as an opportunity to program beyond the shelves, and focusing on the demographics within our community to highlight them and have them feel seen and heard. And so I'm going to talk about the youth mental health crisis for just a little bit, to kind of really emphasize why play is such an important component of programming. Next slide. Here's the newest Nations Report card that was just released. We can see that kids are improving in math, but they're still really struggling with reading due to the COVID slide. The public health report on youth mental health highlights how so technology is everywhere, and especially with Gen Alpha, they were kind of raised on tablets and on computers. And as I mentioned earlier, we were doing our story times on Zoom, and those sweet kids gathering together like we are today. But it really caused a disparity and gap with reading opportunities and for early literacy. And the youth mental health crisis that the kids are experiencing across all generations, it's a really hard thing to navigate. And so it's really impacting their emotional, psychological, and social well-being. And race is a component of this too, which is why multicultural programming is more important than ever. So again, those kids can feel seen and heard. Next slide. And mental health was on the horizon even before the COVID pandemic. Here we can see, this is from the Office of the Surgeon General. I don't think it's been deleted yet since I've made the slideshow, but if you want to save this before it does, it shows what we as librarians, as community leaders, can do to help kids with mental health. With mental health issues, they are experiencing mental, emotional, and developmental or behavioral disorders. And with our programming, that wonderful programming that we do and implement at our libraries, and giving them that opportunity to play and do art and create and know that the library is beyond books and the shelves. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for all of us to join together and let those kids from minority groups and their culture and their diverse backgrounds feel like the library is a safe place for them to feel acknowledged. Next slide. And here, I know we have some folks from out of state with us today, but the Indiana Kids Count data book, this shows the landscape on how mental health is a serious issue here in our state of Indiana. I recommend you looking up what your Kids Count data book is in your state to get to know what disparities the library can help narrow are. And this may look even different just across our state because we have urban and rural areas. But as you can see, where kids aren't having access to the mental health resources that they need. And so next slide, Beth. The Office of the Surgeon General states that as community leaders, we can address unique mental health risks such by highlighting their racial and ethnic minorities, the LGBTQ plus youth, foster youth, youth in the juvenile justice system, and youth with disabilities by just elevating their voices of these young people and their families. Next slide. So what is thematic programming? Let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. So it's focusing on an overarching theme and then plug and play by featuring a prolific person, group, event, or folktale from that culture. I started with doing it in my story times, which I'll get into explaining in just a little bit here. And then I started doing it for the elementary aged youth in my community. Next slide, Beth. So some suggested professional reading. These books really helped me when I was doing my preliminary research for trying to figure out how to make it authentic. I wanted to program with intent, and these books were the saving grace for me. Let's talk about race and story times. I learned in other webinars, and it was really helpful for facilitating and planning my ages 4, 5, and 6 story times. Beyond February, teaching Black history all day, every day, and all year long for grades K through 3 by Donovan M. James. This is a wonderful book because Black history is more than just a month. It's something that can be observed all year long. And then anti-racist art activities for kids. I also have this in my professional collection. It has so many art projects that are inspirational for all of the cultural celebration months. And so I highly recommend acquiring them for your professional collection so you can learn more about it. Next slide, Beth. So theme examples. I'm sure most of you implement a lot of these already at your library, but by including a feature for these, it can take your programming to the next level and make it a multicultural observance. So music, art, I've done some dance, STEM, which we're always trying to learn how to integrate into our programming, coding, which coding doesn't have to be scary. I highly recommend starting with Girls Who Code because their training is for people with no computer science experience, but they make it very tangible and within arm's reach, and they break it down so it's easy to implement. Baking, I used to be a pastry chef in my previous life before librarianship, so I love including baking, but there's so many books and resources available to make it not intimidating. And with dough, it's just flour, water, and salt. And the kids love, it's like slime, but it's something that they can take home and bake or that you could bake for them at the library. Food in general, kids love coming to the library for food. Gardening can be facilitated and planned to include multicultural celebrations. Folk tales from around the world, movements like yoga and mindfulness. Next slide. And then here are the feature examples of the multicultural celebrations that we here at Westchester Public Library observe. Black History Month, Women's History Month, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, which is next month in May. We're currently observing Arab American Heritage Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, which is September 15th through October 15th every year. And then in November, we observe Native American Heritage Month. I'm going to break these down for you and provide program examples for each of these. And you're welcome to use them to partner with, make community partnerships and implement them at your libraries. Next slide. So why feature? So starting, it takes courage to start multicultural programming, but doing so bridges the divides that we and the disparities that we covered earlier in this webinar. We're not only librarians, but we're information scientists and research professionals. So we're trained to have the ability to research what we don't already know. By including and featuring multicultural celebration months into your programming, it allows you to program, like I said before, with intent. So just break it down, kind of like ask yourself the reference questions that we do, who, what, when, where, and how. And then if you can't find a picture book for the feature that you're covering in your program, just make a short slideshow. Our kids are, I mean, I'm a parent, they're the YouTube short generation, so their attention spans don't really go beyond like the 5 or 10-minute book. Let's see, what was number 10 on the movement and mindfulness, Emma. And then, and so just make a short slideshow, and it's kind of like making your own picture book too. And then maybe you'll be inspired to publish it one day. All right, next slide. So what are examples of play? I'm a very sensorial librarian. I'm also on the spectrum. And so I like music. I like dimmed lights. I like programming for all kids and all abilities. And so I feel like sensory play does not have to end with toddlerhood. I try to integrate an immersive experience with an awakening of senses, movement, and creativity for all youth ages. And I'm a firm believer that given blank canvas, kids can change the world. Sometimes instead of a step-by-step craft or activity, they just need blank canvas so they can express themselves. And so I usually project an example of, like, for example, a featured artist like Romare Bearden from the Harlem Renaissance. And then they just kind of use that as an inspiration and create their own artwork at the library. And so let's dive into examples of play together. Next slide. Music and Art Social Club is a series of programs that I do throughout the year. And it's truly, in essence, thematic programming, because music and art is the theme. And then I introduce the children to an artist or art form or an art movement, like neo-expressionism. And then we listen to music from that era or country. And so that's also a feature. Like, for example, when I did Frida Kahlo, I guess she really loves Beethoven sonatas. That was her favorite music that she would create art to. So I just played that in the background while the kids did their own art portraits of themselves. Next slide. Little Explorers is my ages 4, 5, and 6-year-old story time, and I hold it in 4 to 6 week sessions. And so each session is a different theme, and then each week has a different feature and play. And so in the fall, I do folk tales. It's a 6-week session, so we visit a different continent each week, and I read a folk tale from a country within that continent, and then we do an art project that's inspired from that story or that culture. And then How Things Work is a STEM story time, and I try to feature a different BIPOC scientist or math, or I try to feature, or even if it's just in a BIPOC author of a picture book. Poetry Lab, again, I feature BIPOC authors in the, while I'm reading the poetry books. I did Ada Lamone's In Praise of Mystery, and showing the kids the author's photo before reading the book really bridges a divide. And so I recommend doing that. I do mindfulness and movement for social and emotional learning, and we do yoga each week. to focus on mental health. And then right now, this month for Financial Capability Month, it is very hard to get kids into poetry, but I kind of think of it as poetry deconstructed, especially since these kids are still learning how to write their name. And so an example of an activity is I introduce them to rhyming schemes, and then they just code their own pattern bracelet, beaded bracelet. And then at the end of the session for the last class, I just got blank hardcover picture books, and then they got to design their own picture book, like the poet laureate Ada Limon, who's a Hispanic poet that I love personally. She's my favorite. She's coming out with a new book this year. But going back for Financial Capability Month, I'm doing math rocks for my theme this month. And yeah, next slide. So Music and Arts Social Club. Last summer for Juneteenth, it was a new celebration for my library, and I was like, how do I do this? And so then I loved the simplicity and how the art is very non-intimidating for Jean-Michel Basquiat. It lets kids know that art doesn't have to be perfection. And then since he was an artist in the 80s, and that was also when hip hop and punk music came out, I made a playlist of kid-friendly hip hop and punk music. I highly recommend vetting the lyrics before you curate a playlist or play something off Hoopla. But the kids love this program. Yeah, it's a good playlist. I did, gosh, what's the movie called? Wild Style, and Fab Five Freddy was on that soundtrack. And that was a very like kid-friendly version of hip hop, and that movie was from the 80s. And then punk music, the lyrics aren't too bad. I found that with hip hop, I had to vet the lyrics a little bit more, but the Wild Style soundtrack was really helpful for making the hip hop component of the playlist. And speaking of hip hop, I've also done a hip hop dance class. Last year, I believe it was the 50th anniversary of hip hop music. And so it was a good opportunity to bring that to the library. We're lucky enough to have a dance studio just 2 blocks away from our library. So I reached out to them, and for an affordable honorarium, they let us borrow one of their hip hop dance instructors, and she came to the library and did a hip hop dance class, and it was really cool. I did that for Black History Month before. I've also done jazz, and like I mentioned earlier, Romare Bearden, which is a mixed media artist from the Harlem Renaissance, and I brought in a real saxophone that the kids were able to pick up and check out. And I was like, there was one kid who just fell in love with it so much. And I'm like, how cool, maybe he's gonna play the saxophone one day just from this experience at the library. For Romare Bearden, they did collages. Every year our library purges magazines that are older than 2 years. And that's in January. And so I just made sure to go through and get the magazines that had kid-friendly ads and pictures in them. And the kids had the opportunity to just cut them up and glue them together. I gave them some paint pens and some paint, and they had a lot of fun. And so if you still have magazines in your library when you're reading them, they're a good opportunity to give to kids because they love cutting up and gluing pictures together. And it's a simple program, but it's so much fun. Okay, next slide.
And I wanted to call your attention also, there's a question from Brian about how you run your collage programs real quick, and then I'll.
For some of the magazines, we had to pre-cut them because they had such cool pictures, but some of the ads weren't very kid-friendly. Other magazines, we just give them the whole magazine and they flip through them, especially the kid. I have children's magazines in my department, and so those ones were safe for the kids to take their own magazine. Or Teen Breathe is a really good magazine with beautiful graphics in it. So yeah. And now for baking, baking can absolutely have a multicultural feature. The book that you see in the middle of this slide, The Only Way to Make Bread, is a wonderful book that goes over how every culture has their own way of making bread. It's such a beautiful book. These programs are for ages K through 4, but I've also done baking for ages 4, 5, and 6 at my story time. We have a wonderful local baker who I work at a downtown library. It's a small town, but we're downtown. And we have a wonderful baker that has his bakery a couple blocks away, and I've had him come in and walk the kids through how to make bread dough and just kneading it, and then they take it home to proof and then put it in the oven, and it's delicious. All you need is flour, water, and salt. I'm going to be brave and do Chicago style pizza this summer, where I'm going to bake the dough, well, not the dough, but the pizzas in little like parchment boats. Chicago style pizza, if you don't know, is the stuffed pizza, which, since they're in contained parchment boats, I can kind of Tetris them into the oven on a cookie sheet without it taking as much surface area as a loaf of bread, because I just don't we don't have that big of an oven here at my library. But how I do it is they make the dough or the batter and take and bake. And take and bake is okay. So you can get parchment boats. When I did soul food and taught kids about Jamaican hummingbird bread, which is so hummingbird is the state bird of Jamaica, and they emailed, not emailed, but because it was back in like the 50s, they sent the recipe to Southern Living and Good Housekeeping, and it became this like huge thing, and it became one of the key staple cakes of the South, and soul food. For my baking programs, I do 12 to 18 kids. For the pizza program, I'm gonna have to do 12 so I can fit them all in the oven. But for taking the dough home, you can get parchment boats. They're like little rectangular boats, and just wrap them up in plastic wrap and they take them home. And so for soul food, I read Soul Food Sunday, the picture book, and it was a great picture book that goes over the collard greens and all the wonderful food that folks down south have on their table for soul food. It's a very immersive, beautiful book, and you can also read The Only Way to Make Bread, which is also a wonderful book. I've also done sustainable baking for since April is Financial Capability Month, and I called that program Baking for a Better Planet. But we're here today talking about multicultural programming, but that could easily, by just reading The Only Way to Make Bread, you can feature how all cultures have different doughs that they identify with and that are an important part of their culture. And so, yeah, you can totally make baking and food into a multicultural feature celebration. Next slide. For Women's History Month, this month I did Women of Bauhaus, and I just got looms off Discount School Supply. And the kids wove their own tapestry, and it was a lot of fun. I just got like a little briefcase of different colored yarns, and they had fun. It's so amazing how when you give a kids a project, and just give them the time and the materials and the space to create, how they walk away with completely different projects. One kid made a landscape, and he made a seascape with birds flying. But the story of the women of Bauhaus was a very interesting Bauhaus Germany from the art school. And so I just made a short slideshow introducing them to how, because back then it was unheard of for women to, well, maybe not unheard of, but it was rare for them to have higher education opportunities, especially in the art scene. But they kind of broke barriers at the School of Bauhaus. It was kind of unfortunate though, because the school only allowed them to do weaving or like traditional women fields of artwork, but they did it, and they made such beautiful tapestries and woven materials. And so the kids were really inspired. I would recommend that. And I've also done more Women's History Month programs. Next slide. First aid and CPR. By featuring American Red Cross founder Clara Barton, I've done a first aid and CPR program. I reached out to my local fire department, and they came and did a free first aid and CPR workshop for kids, and the kids loved it. They had so much fun. I never did CPR training before, and so I was astounded at how difficult it was to do the compressions, but the kids were tough and fearless, and they came together and learned what would happen in an emergency and how the fire department comes and helps. And what was really cool is that our local fire captain is a female. And so they brought 2 female firefighters to talk to the kids. And again, I made a short slideshow about Clara Barton and how she was the pioneer of modern nursing. And then the kids got to see real women in uniform who are local, trusted, and honorable professionals. Next slide. More music and art social clubs. So for Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, I've done quite a few programs. You can do these any time of the year. So Shibori indigo dyeing, I did as an all ages multi-generational program. So indigo dye comes from leaves from an Asian tree, and we use that natural dye to color linen drawstring bags. I remember indigo was like a really big thing like a decade ago, but the families really enjoyed coming together and dyeing with a natural indigo dye. And so I just did some research about the plants and the color indigo. I think since then there have been a few books. I can think of a few picture books that are specifically about the color blue and indigo dye that would be great to read at this program. I've also done an anime and manga con to introduce kids to the genres. And they made their own cosplay and just learned about the anime and manga culture. This was a really cool program because I did it in a way that I was introducing the kids to the genre without expectations that they've already read or watched the materials. And then for my story time for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds, when I do my folk tales and we visit the continent Asia, we've done Chinese paper lanterns, and they've also really enjoyed Rangoli sand art, where you just get different color sands. I think Discount School Supply has like a ready-made craft, but you can also just get different colored sands, and they make sand sculptures together by peacefully pouring the sand into different designs. Next slide. More Asian American and Pacific Islander Month programs are, I've done a boba party and taught kids about boba. You can get boba kits. I got it on Amazon that comes with, it's meant to be for a boba party, like, I don't know, like a kid's birthday party or sleepover is how I would envision it. But it comes with a bunch of different flavors. And so the kids got to try taro, which is a purple sweet potato, brown sugar boba, and matcha, the green tea boba. And then we did a boba craft together afterwards. I've also done origami cranes, and then the kids assembled them into kinetic mobiles like Alexander Calder, who isn't an Asian American or Pacific Islander, but it was a cool opportunity to teach kids about kinetic sculpture. And so I taught them about the history of origami, and specifically the origami crane, and how it's good luck if you fold 1,000 cranes, but we made it through 4 of them. The kids, it was a good opportunity to learn the dexterity. There's different abilities at the program, and so some parents helped, but some kids were able to do it on their own, but it kind of ended up being like a family program. And also artist Yayoi Kusama, who is known for her polka dot artwork. Again, a non-intimidating artist that you can introduce kids to and then they can do the pointillism. You can use Q-tips or even dot markers, or they could just make their own polka dots with whatever materials you have available. But she's another really cool Asian artist that you can feature and highlight at a program. Next slide. I actually did Frida Kahlo for a Pride program, but you can use her for Hispanic Heritage Month. The National Gallery of Art has, because I found that with self-portraits, kids can be a little intimidated by creating themselves, because they don't want that disappointment that it doesn't look like them. But I found silhouettes on the National Gallery of Art. They have lesson plans, and they have like dozens of different silhouettes that you can cut out, and then the kids can use that as a starting point and a template. But what the kids ended up doing at the program is they filled the silhouette with how they see themselves versus how the world sees them. And so it was this beautiful, colorful, expressive, so many different versions of art. I didn't see any of the kids do like a realistic portrait of themselves. It was very expressionistic. And so I think that was a really good opportunity. Like I said, I did it for Pride Month. And so the kids focused on identity and just how they see themselves. But featuring Frida Kahlo and how she likes to listen to the Beethoven sonatas is a good music and art social club that you can do for Hispanic Heritage Month. Next slide. Coding. So coding does not, they do a lot of coding. I know code.org, a lot of the technology teachers at schools are usually certified through code.org, but we can also do it at the library, and code.org, like Girls Who Code, have a lot of resources to teach any adult how to plug and play with their coding games that they have available. So for my NASA program, there's this really cool coding program where you like code your own galaxy, but you use sonification to like DJ the orbits of and so they're like making mixtapes and also coding the orbits of their planets and moons. And it's a really cool program. I've also done Python, where the kids make their own like light up designs. I've done Roblox Studio, which Roblox Studio is where you like actually design your own server game, where you can set up a classroom and make like kid safe accounts, and then they can all code in Roblox Studio together. An Hour of Code also has a lot of resources. And by just featuring a BIPOC leader in the tech industry, you can make this for a Multicultural Heritage Month by introducing kids to coding, getting them off the usual game platforms that they're on, and they love learning how to code their own games. It's empowering. There's Hour of Code has Minecraft coding, Hour of Code games, and yeah, Roblox Studio, or Python was really cool. Python was awesome because the kids got to like code their own artwork. But yeah, so Coders Unite or Gamers Unite can certainly be a multicultural program. Next slide. More Music and Art Social Club for Native American Heritage Month. There's this really cool Native American artist. Her name is Wendy Red Star, and I kind of saw her artwork as like scenic transcendence, which I just kind of pulled out of a hat by marrying those two words together. But her creative printmaking was really cool. And so then the kids were inspired to think of a place that they wanted to be, and then they drew or painted where that was. And so they really thought about placement and home and safe places and adventure. I've also done braiding sweetgrass by Robin Ball Kimmerer. She has a braiding sweetgrass book for young adults, which is very approachable, and it has beautiful graphics throughout the book. And so I introduce kids to the history of sweetgrass, and you can order sweetgrass on Etsy, just bundles of it. And oh my gosh, it smells so good. It's fragrant. It kind of smells like vanilla marshmallows. And so the programming room smelled wonderful in that program. But I taught kids how to braid with sweetgrass, and they learned about how important that plant is in Native American culture and history. Next slide. Oh no, I played Native American music at that program. Next slide. Seeds for Thought, I'm doing for Mental Health Awareness Month next month, where I'm just providing the kids with vegetable seeds and then teaching them how fresh produce and gardening and working outside and simply touching grass is good for our mental health. I know this isn't a multicultural program, but you can make it a multicultural program by introducing kids to a plant from or a vegetable from a different culture or a different cuisine, like giving them a soul food garden or an Asian garden or a Zen garden, but it can absolutely be a multicultural program. And that is a wrap. Do you have any questions or do you have any programs that you would like to share that you've done at your library? And here's my email. If you have any questions, feel free to email me too if you're not brave enough to do it in the chat box. But oh, thank you, Kara.
Yes, thank you so much, Justine. If anybody has any, we have a couple more minutes. You can.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what you do at your library. I know that there, like, for example, we just started observing Arab American Heritage Month, so I haven't personally done an Arab American program yet, but I'd love to hear what you've done at your library.
And
Corn
I'm
husk dolls are an awesome program. I actually did that with Hispanic Heritage Month, but it can absolutely be a Native American Heritage Month program.
great. Several ideas for that. Um, I'm curious, does anyone out there reach out to anyone in their community who is maybe of that culture to co-present or co-design any of um your programs? If anyone does that. Have you ever worked with anyone, Justine?
No, but I'm interested in reaching out to the Indian community to do like a Bollywood dance program. I think that would be really cool because they use our programming space once a month to do their practices, but I would love to do that for all kids in the community.
That sounds insanely fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I highly recommend getting that sweetgrass off Etsy. I know that there's at least one vendor, but every year, when I look back, she still has it available and it's so fresh. She cures it really well.
Let's see, Jenny has a question. Yeah, the recording is going to be available. So just a heads up, I have to transcribe the video first, and then I will send it out once it is ready, definitely within 30 days of today, but usually within a week or two. I will send that out to everyone who registered, and it will also be posted on the State Library's archived webinar page. So all that will be there along with the slides, which Justine has already sent to me. So I have those in my possession already. And we'll post those. And I'm going to put, if you need an LEU certificate for watching today, I'm putting that link in the chat. Go there ideally right after this. That would be great. But definitely within about 24 hours. Then I close that form because I like to get the LEUs out to you as quickly as possible. So yeah, any other questions for me or for Justine? These jam-packed full of great ideas. Thank you so much, Justine, for your time today.
At your library, you're welcome to take and make them your own.
And Ashley says they might reach out with more
Oh,
questions.
hi, Ashley.
Are you, I assume you've shared your email address. Are you okay with folks reaching out to you?
Yes, you can
Great.
absolutely reach out to me. She's from a neighbor library,
Ah.
but
Oh
all
yeah,
of
I
you
know
are.
Ashley. Yay. All right. Well, I'm not seeing an influx of additional questions or anything, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you again to Justine for presenting today. Yep, I just let everyone know that the slides and the recording will be posted, and I will send this out to everyone who registered.
There's
So
lots of
great to push that.
hyperlinks throughout the slideshow, so feel
Yeah,
free to use it for supplemental research.
awesome. I put the LU request form there. So if you missed me saying that before, please make sure you go and fill that out. If you need an LU certificate, do that as soon as possible. And I think we're gonna call it a day. Thank you again so
Yay.
much, Justine. Thanks to
Thank you
everybody.
guys.
Yeah,
It's
thanks to
so good
everybody
to be
for
with library
watching.
people this afternoon. Thank
Awesome.
you. Bye.